Imagine waking up on a Monday morning. You don't have to rush to work and you can just sip your coffee knowing that your investments are paying for your lifestyle. It sounds like a dream, but that's the magic of living off dividends. But how much money do you actually need to have invested in order to make that happen? Let's dive into it today. And if you're new here, hi, I'm Queenie and I'm here to help you make your money go further. So whether you're chasing complete financial independence and retiring early, or would just like to add a really passive income stream, then this video is for you. This video is sponsored by Pearler, which is the investing platform that I use, and also the investing app that I use for my daughter. She's only 1.5 years old and I've already set up an investment portfolio for her, but I'll talk more about them later in this video. Just keep in mind that this video is general advice only and doesn't take into account your personal situation. You can read my full financial services guide in the description. So first, what actually are dividends? Dividends are essentially the profits that some companies decide to give to their shareholders. So they're literally shares in ETFs that can pay you for owning them. Imagine buying a box of chocolates and not only do you get the whole box and all of the chocolates inside, but they even give you chocolates every single year. That's basically what dividend paying companies and ETFs do. So here's exactly how it works. When a company makes a profit, they have two choices. They can reinvest their profit back into the business to grow the business more, or they can distribute their profits to their shareholders through dividends. And if you own shares, you basically get a dividend based on how many shares you hold. For example, let's say a company pays 50 cents per share, and you hold 1,000 shares. That means that you'll receive $500 in dividends. Not every company pays a dividend. Generally, big banks and miners typically pay dividends, but things like tech stocks don't really pay dividends because they prefer to reinvest their profits back into the business to grow. Instead of picking individual dividend stocks, another option is to invest in a dividend ETF. These ETFs basically take all of the hard research out of it and they group together companies that pay higher than usual dividends. The ETF collects all of the dividends from these companies and then passes it on to you. Usually these payments are quarterly. When you receive a dividend, you have two options. You can take the dividend out into your bank account and spend it, or you can automatically reinvest your dividends back into the ETF that you've bought. So you can do this through dividend reinvestment plans. The benefit of setting this up is basically you don't need to pay brokerage fees every time that you reinvest your dividends back into the stock that you bought, but you can also get your dividends paid out into your broker like Pearler and then keep the dividends sitting in your cash account. And next time you're ready to invest, you already have some dividends sitting there that you can reinvest in whatever stock that you like. I personally like to have my dividends sitting in my brokerage account so then I can choose where I would like to invest my money. I used to set up dividend reinvestment plans, but I found that the paperwork was quite messy, especially when I've been doing my taxes. It can get a bit messy with dividend reinvestment plans. Whereas if you have your dividends paid out into your brokerage account, you can easily see how many dividends you have and therefore what tax you need to pay on them. Another really important thing to keep in mind when it comes to dividends is dividends are classed as income, so no matter what option you choose, whether it's having your dividends paid out in a bank account, setting up a dividend reinvestment plan, or having your dividends paid out in your broker and then reinvesting that way, you still need to pay tax on the dividends that you receive. Basically, the dividends that you receive each year gets added to your tax return as income, and then you pay tax at your marginal tax rate. But there is a really cool benefit of franking credits, which are basically tax credits that you can get from investing in Australian shares. But I'll talk more about franking credits later in this video. And now for the exciting part, how much money do you actually need to live off dividends? So let's crunch the numbers. Let's say you want $50,000 per year in dividend income. This is what the formula looks like. It's basically annual income divided by dividend income equals investment needed. So if you get a 3% dividend yield, then you'll need $1.67 million invested. If you get a 4% dividend yield, then you'll need $1.25 million invested. And if you have a 5% dividend yield, then you'll need $1 million invested. And let's say you just want $20,000 in side income from dividends, then you'll need $500,000 invested with a 4% dividend yield. And if you want $100,000 per year in dividend income, then you'll need $2 million invested at a 5% dividend yield. So as you can see from these numbers, the higher the dividend yields that you have, the less money that you need invested. But higher yields doesn't always necessarily mean that they're better stocks or better ETFs. Some companies do pay lower yields, but they also give you a bit more diversification in your portfolio. As discussed earlier, you still need to pay tax on your dividends, but when you invest in Australian shares, they usually come with franking credits. Franking credits are essentially tax credits for the tax that has already been paid by a company. company, because before a company pays you a dividend, they have to pay tax at the company tax rate, which is 30%. So to stop Australian investors from being taxed twice, there's this franking credit system. So basically, when you receive a dividend from an Australian company, you also receive a tax credit for the tax that has already been paid by a company. So basically, when you receive a dividend from an Australian company, you get a tax credit for the tax that has already been paid by the company. So depending on your marginal tax rate, you could get a tax refund, or you may need to pay slightly more tax. So let's say, for example, you receive a $1,000 dividend from an Australian company with a franking credit and a $1,000 dividend from a US company with no franking credit. Let's see how much tax you need to pay on each. So let's start with the US company first. You receive a $1,000 dividend with no franking credit, and let's say your marginal tax rate is 37% per year. So after putting this $1,000 dividend in your tax return at your 37% marginal tax rate, you pay $370 tax on this dividend, and then you get to keep $630. Now let's compare it to the $1,000 dividend from the Australian company with the franking credit. So before this $1,000 dividend got paid to you, the company needed to pay 30% tax on it. So you basically get a $1,000 dividend plus a franking credit of $428.57. So on your tax return, you declare the $1,000 dividend plus the franking credit. And with a 37% marginal tax rate, that means that the tax payable would be $100 and you get to keep $900. And the great thing is, if your marginal tax rate is lower than 30%, like retirees or people in lower tax brackets, then you might even get a tax refund for the tax that has already been paid by the company. So it's a really great benefit of investing in Australian companies. So now we know more about what a dividend is and how much money you actually need to live off dividends. Now let's get into some high dividend deals ETFs. Keep in mind that these aren't recommendations, I'm just giving you some options to see what's out there. And there are quite a lot of ETFs out there that don't specifically position themselves as dividend ETFs that still pay really good dividends. For example, like VAS, A200 and A300, but we're focusing on dividend ETFs for today. The first one is VHY, which is the Vanguard Australian Shares High Dividend Deals ETF. This ETF gives you exposure to Australian companies on the ASX that are forecasted to have higher than usual dividends. The top holdings for this ETF are BHP, Commonwealth Bank, Westpac, NAB, Telstra and more. If you invested $10,000 into this ETF 5 years ago, you would have $20,506 today. There are also 75 companies that make up this ETF, and this ETF has a dividend yield of 4.2% per year. The next ETF is IHG, which is the iShares Dividend Opportunities ESG Screened ETF. This ETF gives you exposure to 50 companies listed on the Australian Stock Exchange that are predicted to have higher than usual dividends, but they're also ESG screened, which means it has more of an ethical focus. The management fee for this ETF is 0.23%, and the top holdings for this ETF are Westpac, NAB, ANZ, BHP, Transuburban and more. And as we can see here, this company has screened out companies that have an involvement in controversial weapons, nuclear weapons, civilian firearms, tobacco, UN violators, thermal coal, oil sands and more. If you invested $10,000 into this ETF 5 years ago, you would have $17,656 today. And the dividend yield for this ETF is 4.32%. And the next ETF is Moat, which is the Van Eck Morningstar Wide Moat ETF. While this ETF doesn't have high dividend in the name, it has given out really good dividends or distributions in the past few years. This ETF invests in US companies with sustainable competitive advantages. The management fee is 0.49%. There are 53 holdings in this ETF, and over the past 5 years, this ETF has given investors income or distributions of 5.32% per year or 3.49% over the past 10 years. The total return from the past 5 years has been 15.52% per year, and the total return over the past 10 years has been 15.23% per year. And the top holdings are Applied Materials, Estee Lauder, Huntington, Thermo Fisher, US Bancorp and more. And the next ETF is SYI, which is the Australia Select High Dividend Yield ETF. The management fees are 0.2%, and this ETF aims to give investors exposure to companies with relatively high dividend yields with potential franking credits. The dividend yield is 4.13% per year, and there are 62 holdings in this ETF. Over 5 years, it's returned 13.26% per year, and over 10 years, it's returned 8.39% per year. If you invested $10,000 into this ETF 10 years ago, you would have $31,919 today, which is crazy. It means your money would have tripled. The top holdings are Westpac, NAB, ANZ, Macquarie, Telstra, and more. The next ETF is DVDY, which is the Van Eck Morningstar Australian Moat Income ETF. The management fees are 0.35%, and there are 25 holdings in this ETF. This ETF aims to give investors exposure to a diversified portfolio of dividend-paying quality ASX-listed companies selected by Morningstar. These are high dividend companies that have a quality moat or competitive advantage. Since this is quite a new ETF, they don't have the data over the past 5 years or 10 years, but the top holdings in this ETF include Nick Scali, ARB, Charter Hall, Lottery Group, NAB, Wesfarmers, Brambles, and more. The dividend yield is 3.86% per year. And the last ETF is VYMI, which is the Vanguard International High Dividend Yield ETF. This ETF isn't actually listed on the Australian Stock Exchange, but it is listed on the US Stock Exchange, which is available with an investing app like Pearler. This ETF provides investors with a convenient way to get exposure to international stocks that are forecasted to have higher than usual dividends. The management fees are 0.17%, and over the past 5 years, it's returned 14.16% per year. The top holdings are Nestle, Novartis, Roche Holding, HSBC, Shell, Royal Bank of Canada, and more. And the good news is you can invest in any of these high dividend yield ETFs and any ETFs or stocks in general on the Australian Stock Exchange or the US Stock Exchange with a platform like Pearler. I've actually partnered with them for this video, and they are such an amazing platform for long-term investors, and I personally use it for myself and also for my daughter's portfolio. If you have the skills to buy something on your phone, then you have the skills to make an investment, and I'll show you just how easy it is to invest with Pearler. And I just go down here, ASX Invest, and here I just search for the ETF that I would like to invest in. Let's say, for example, VHY, click buy. Here I could put in how much I would like to invest, for example, $1,000. And if you would like to try Pearler for yourself, you can use my code Queenie for a $20 credit. The good news is Pearler's brokerage fees are really low and competitive compared to a lot of apps out there. Their brokerage fee is $6.50 whenever you buy or sell shares, but you can also prepay your credits and pay $5.50 instead. I like to keep my brokerage fees as less than 1% of my total investment amount. So for example, with Pearler, if there's a $6.50 brokerage fee, then I want to make sure that I am investing at least $650. Or if I have prepaid my credits for $5.50, then I want to make sure that I am investing at least $550 or more. And the secret word is harvest. So write us a comment below with the word harvest in it, just so we know you watched this video all the way through. Thank you. Bye.